footage of unannounced Sony shooter allegedly leaks. There's this, is this Portuguese? Yeah, I think it is. There's a Portuguese user called Supernovas who leaked this like very brief, muddy, almost late PS2, early PS3 era looking, what looks like a Mass Effect clone, some sort of sci-fi shooter, third person game of some sort, very brief and very rough, like something that's being made in engine just as placeholders. And so this guy leaks this video, and people can go check it out if they want. We're not going to share it here. And then a leaker, according to Video Games Chronicle, named Dust Golem, has claimed, and they are a reliable leaker, quote, a lot more, they have seen, quote, a lot more of the game, end quote, and that footage is obviously from an older build, we would hope. And the game is apparently being worked on at XDev, and people seem to have made an interesting connection. And we're going to get into what XDev is in a minute, but people seem to have made an interesting connection. In the corner of the screen, as I understand it, the corner of the footage says something about, it says the word red. And people have realized, and I think this is the connection, that this red project is likely in reference to a code name at People Can Fly, the studio once known for its Gears of War support, and of course, more recently working on Outriders with Square Enix. So the suggestion, therefore, is that there is a second-party, XDev produced, People Can Fly, perhaps developed sci-fi shooter in development for PlayStation 5. This is all conjecture, of course, because we don't have any confirmation about this. And it's worth noting that the leaked footage is not nearly as convincing as the leaked footage of Helldivers 2, which showed basically the trailer, and it was just clearly real. This could be made up. I mean, it looks that bad, but things do develop like this. So, so I want to say that it's not necessarily real, but the connections, who knows? Chris, what do you think? That the possibility of a third-person sci-fi shooter looks like it could be from People Can Fly for PlayStation. What do you think?
I think that could be cool. I think that's not necessary. It's one of those things where I feel like it's a niche that I think Sony would do well to fill in some way, because we've talked a lot on the show about just how similar in tone and similar in even aesthetic sometimes a lot of Sony first party titles can be. And to have something that is a little bit more People Can Fly, a little bit more action oriented, a little bit more third person shooter focused. I mean, you could argue that, Last of Us and Uncharted are third person shooters, but they're also, I don't know. Is it weird that I don't really consider them that, even though they are?
No, I agree.
You know what I mean?
No, I do know what you mean. A third person shooter to me is Gears of War.
Right.
Or Outriders, Kill Switch. Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, like those games are more, the other games that I was talking about are more action adventure. So it'd be cool to have something from them in this capacity. Especially, I imagine you're probably more keen on this than anybody because you loved Outriders.
Yeah, I'm amped up about the news. If it's real, I think it's a great selection. First of all, I say time and time again that Poland just seems to be a hotbed of really great game development right now. I think my theory on this is not only the inherent talent of the Polish people, no doubt, but there seems to be an interesting marriage in that country of the embrace of Western sensibilities with what is frankly a lower quality of life, generally speaking, because they're still emerging countries out of the Soviet bloc, where things can be made at a very high quality for a little bit cheaper. And I think you're seeing the fruits of that out of studios like Techland, CD Projekt, and studios like People Can Fly. So I'm excited about it. I want to get into the XDev connection in a second, assuming it's real. But, and again, it's all hypothetical. But Dustin, what do you think about this potential?
I was looking, and I wonder if this is connected to, because this was back in September, looking at an IGN article from September 27th. Take-Two pulls out of agreement with Outriders developer after 2 years in development. This was a game that they codenamed Project Dagger. So maybe this could be related to that. But what I found even more interesting in this article is that from this statement from the CEO of People Can Fly, they outlined their games in development, which at the time, back in September, Project Gemini, which was in partnership with Square Enix, or Enix. That's something that people, is it Enix or Enix? I saw a comment about that. Let's get this sorted out.
So in working with Square Enix in my life, they say Square Enix. But in my experience, that the publishers, the PR people would say Square Enix. When I was a kid, I used to say Enix, but when I was corrected on that. So I don't know if that's changed or there's new conventional wisdom, but that was something that I was checked on early in my career.
I can't remember which one I've said in the past, so I'll just say Annex now and pretend I always said it correctly. So that Project Gemini with Square Enix, while Project Bifrost and Victoria will both be self-published by People Can Fly. And they have an early concept stages for a development called Project Red,
right, this
and
is the
2
one.
VR games.
Right, so the Project Red is the specific one that people think this is.
Right. Okay, so it's not the Take-Two then. But
no.
How many projects they have in development?
Well, what's important to realize is that they seem to have somewhere between 6 and 8 different studio locations now.
Wow.
With well over 500 employees. The interesting one that I think people need to clue in on is that they opened so I think when they were expanding in the lead up to Outriders, I think the first studio they opened outside of Poland was in England. This is relevant because XDev is run out of England. And now, so XDev can work with and does work with a lot of different studios, including they used to work with the one-time second party, Housemarque, who's now in the first party. They're Finnish. So you're not just connected by geography, but that proximity I think might be relevant because XDev used to run out of 3 different places, which was Studio Japan, which no longer exists and has now been subsumed by Team Asobi, Santa Monica Studio, which doesn't have that imprint anymore, but they used to, during the PS3 and PS4 era, a shit ton of games went through there that people would know. And then they have the imprint at at Liverpool, or what was Liverpool. And that's where XDev works out of. It's important to realize that XDev isn't, as people talk about it like it's a studio. It really, it is a group within PlayStation Studios, but it's a production pipeline where they're monitoring games, they're figuring things out, producing them, moving assets around to facilitate the creation of second party products. And the difference between, for those that don't know, I think a lot of people don't know and they're afraid to ask, the difference between first and second party games is a first party game comes from a studio Sony owns, an exclusive that Sony owns. A second party game is a PlayStation exclusive or a Sony published, Sony owned IP made from a studio they don't own. And that's what this would be. So I think the potential is awesome. Dude, Outriders is great. And I personally don't think it's any accident that a truncating Square Enix that is shedding a lot of its Western weight continues to talk about Outriders specifically. When they say like we still have an interest, and I'm just paraphrasing, but in their different things, we still have an interest in Western games as proven by our support of products like Outriders. I don't think we've seen the last of that franchise. I think, and what we're going to realize when we talk about Ubisoft in a little while is every publisher is desperate to get as many games as a service going, or games that can draw your attention for even a season pass and a little bit of time and money. It's urgent. It's an urgent matter. And unfortunately, and we'll get into all of that later, but I think that this is a way for them, Sony, to help fulfill that niche a little bit. And it's an unusual, I wouldn't have never imagined that People Can Fly would work with Sony. So I shouldn't say it that way. I should never imagine that Sony would work with People Can Fly.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.